Hi there, my name is Rob. Welcome to Kinuta Park in Tokyo for some amazing Hanami. We're going to be talking all about Hanami here today, but first of all, it's probably a good idea to establish just exactly what it is. So put simply, Hanami is the traditional springtime custom of viewing cherry blossoms here in Japan. Now, cherry blossoms, by the way, are called sakura in Japanese. So Hanami is all about viewing sakura. If we look a little bit closer at the Chinese characters, the kanji that make up the Japanese word Hanami, we have hana here and mi here, so Hanami. Hana means flowers, and mi means to look at or to observe, so quite literally looking at flowers. Now that could mean any flowers, but in Japan for centuries that has been all about cherry blossom. Now when you're doing Hanami, it's not just about looking at the flowers, you're admiring, you're pondering, and you're celebrating. And those are all little things my fellow insiders are going to be touching upon later on in this tour. Now the first Hanami party was held by Emperor Saga over 1,000 years ago in 812 in the Heian period. He would have feasts under cherry blossom trees, drink sake and read poetry. But even before those parties, sakura was an extremely important part of Japanese culture. It was said that it was a sign that the god of rice paddies had come down from the mountains and was showing that the rice for this year was ready for planting. So it was very, very popular among the emperors in Japan. That spread across to the nobility. As the samurai rose to power, they wanted to get in on the act too. And eventually the samurai governments decided that us commoners could join in too. And so they started planting cherry trees in public spaces, because before that they were largely in private lands. As you can see, it is an extremely popular activity still today, Hanami. It's so popular, in fact, that the Japan Meteorological Agency has a Hanami forecast or sakura forecast every year, kind of like a weather map, and the front of sakura moves up the country, and people keep a very, very close eye on the mankai date or full bloom date. Cherry blossom is around for such a short time. From the first bud sprouting to all of the cherry blossom gone is less than 2 weeks. And so people really want to find that real sweet spot. So we've talked a little bit about Hanami, what it is, but how exactly do you do it? Well, in many ways, it hasn't really changed from the feasts of Emperor Saga over 1,000 years ago. You, first of all though, need a tarpaulin, which we have prepared down here. So I'm going to take my shoes off, as otherwise in Japan it'd be very rude to be stepping on my tarpaulin with my shoes on. You've got your tarpaulin. In really, really popular places for Hanami, particularly if you're in a work group, you might send your most junior member out at the beginning of the work day to come and sit here on their tarpaulin and wait for the rest of the work party to finish their work and come here after work. So you could be really just waiting here all day just to hold your spot. Once you've got everyone together, you've got your drinks, you've got your snacks, maybe you're feeling a bit traditional and you start reading some poetry. You're basically doing Hanami. So drinking, as I just mentioned, is a big part of celebrating Hanami. And the most quintessential, the most traditional of Hanami drinks is sake. Our expert in sake, Van, is going to be talking to us all about that from Kyoto. So let's head over to Van in Kyoto.
Hey, let's talk about what to drink during Hanami. So people might try to tell you that it's beer or other beverages. I think the correct answer is sake, aka Nihonshu. And for that, today we're in Fushimi, which is a small district in the southern part of Kyoto City, famous for sake brewing. So the water here is so good that there's over 40 sake breweries, like this one behind me, just in this small parcel of land. So you can walk around and visit as many as you like. As many people might know, sake is made of just 4 ingredients. You've got the water, you've got the rice, you've got the yeast, and you've got actually a type of fungus called koji. And these 4 ingredients alone are responsible for the incredible fruity flavors that you get in sake. It's kind of magic. I think most people at this point are familiar with the small cups that sake is drank with. This is traditionally called a guinomi, a drinking vessel. And the reason they're so small is so that people around you are obligated to pour for you. Japan is a pouring culture. You're supposed to pour for your friends. You're never supposed to pour for yourself. And this becomes readily apparent during Hanami parties. And I wanted to introduce you guys to one of my favorite types of drinking vessel. Now this one's in the shape of a fanciful mask. This is a traditional character called Hyotoko, who's like a sort of puckering old Japanese man. As you can see, it's a cup. But you can imagine this is going to be pretty hard to set down, and the whole point is that you can't. It's supposed to stay in your hand, and of course being in your hand, your friends are going to be obligated to continuously pour you sake, getting you rapidly drunk during Hanami. This is exactly the point. Some of these you'll see have a small hole in the side that you have to hold your finger over, but I think it's a fun tradition to hunt down while you're sipping sake under the Hanami blossoms. On to you, Brett.
Hey everybody, I'm Brett and I'm here in the beautiful Setagaya district in Tokyo. Go along with what Van said with drinking, I want to talk about one of my favorite things with cherry blossom season, snacks. If there's one thing the Japanese love, it's seasonality. What does that mean? Well, every country has its own season, but Japan has made Sakura season kind of their identity. What does that mean with snacks? Well, let me show you, right? So when cherry blossom season comes, right, there's all these drinks and snacks that come out only during this season. And you got to get them quickly because like the cherry blossoms, they're here and then they're gone the next day. So I want to show you some of my favorites, all right? Let's start with the best thing to drink during cherry blossom season, sorry Van, is right here, beer. So this is a beer from Sapporo, and this is Sakura beer. All right, it's the same beer inside, but again, this can here has kind of made this, Sakura motif, which makes it sell out very quickly because you got to get this beer before it's gone. You don't want regular Sapporo, right? You want cherry blossom Sakura. So next that, another beer you have here. This is a very popular Asahi beer that most people may know, right? Again, it has this pink can with the nice cherry blossoms on it. You got to get this because it'll be gone within a week. It's the same beer on the inside, but it has a pink can, right? But it's not just drinks, it's also snacks. So what do you have here? One of my favorite snacks, which is, this isn't seasonal, but most Japanese people eat it when you're here doing Hanami, right? And it's right here. This is kakipi. Brett, what is kakipi? Well, let me break it down for you. Yeah, kaki is the Japanese word for persimmon. And so what you have here are these little rice crackers shaped like persimmon seeds, right? They're just rice, it's just senbei, so it's rice crackers, tastes like soy. That's the kaki. Well, Brett, what is the P of the kakipi? The P is peanuts, right here. So that is the P of kakipi. So it's senbei and peanuts mixed together. This is what almost everybody eats during Sakura season, not even regular seasons as well. So what is another snack here? This is Sakura roll cake. This is kind of a Western snack, right? But it's just basically sponge cake with Sakura jam on the inside. Again, this will be gone before you know it. You got to get it now. Fear of missing out, FOMO, right? One thing that is truly seasonal here during Sakura season is only during cherry blossom season is right here. This is Sakura mochi. Yeah, you can see there. It's this pink flavored mochi. Well, what is mochi? Mochi, you know what mochi is. Mochi is pounded rice, right? They take a bunch of rice, they put it into a kind of a stone mason there, and they pound it with a hammer. And they pound it, and they fold it, and they pound it, and they fold it until it gets kind of glutinous, kind of, right? And then they fold it up, and they put stuff in the middle. Most likely, like this one, this is red bean paste. And I've already taken a bite. This is red bean paste on the inside. It's a very sweet snack, right? But why this is different, this is Sakura mochi. Sakura mochi usually is wrapped in a Sakura leaf, like a pickled Sakura leaf that you can eat and kind of balance out the sweetness with saltiness. This one doesn't have that, but this one actually has, you can see, a Sakura blossom on it that's been pickled, right? Again, this is a great snack that's only during this time. It's a great snack to eat during this time. The Japanese, as you've seen, love their seasonality. I guess the ephemeral nature of the Sakura is what the Japanese love, which brings me to death. The Japanese love to be reminded that you're all going to die someday, right? What's that mean with the Sakura? Well, if you think about it, this theme has kind of embedded itself. It runs through all of the Japanese culture when it comes to religion, especially when it comes to their pop culture and when it comes to their history. What I'm saying about this is you can see the cherry blossoms now. If there isn't any rain, any snow, any wind, they'll stay here for maybe a week, a few days at best, and then they're gone. And that's how the Japanese look at life a lot of the times, right? Especially when talking about the samurai. The samurai, the ancient warriors of Japan, right? Their number one honor was to die on the field of battle, right? They're here and then they're gone. And that's one way to celebrate life, and that's what the Japanese do with this, right? If you're gonna be here, not for that much time, then you might as well be here with your friends, drinking Asahi beer and eating kakipi. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Robert and I am based out of the city of Osaka, and I am here just a mere 1 hour train journey south of the city in the Nara prefecture to witness a stunning alternative view of cherry blossoms from above, lining up the different levels along Mount Yoshino, which is part of one of the World Heritage National Parks here in Japan. And so this area has a long-standing history dating back around 1,300 years, when a mountain ascetic called En-no-gyoja is believed to have encountered the deity Zao Gongen and subsequently carved an image of this deity from one of the sakura trees here at Mount Yoshino. And so this particular deity is said to protect the sacred mountains of this area, and Shugendo, a spiritual tradition which combines both Buddhist and Shinto beliefs, was born. And so those who partake in this unique practice is believed to achieve superhuman powers related to healing and purification and eventual enlightenment through strict hermit-like training within these sacred mountains. And so En-no-gyoja now is widely regarded as the founder of Shugendo, and Kinpun-senji, the head temple of Kinpun-sen Shugendo branch, is right here at Mount Yoshino. And so this area became revered for its prominence as a sacred place, and this prompted numerous pilgrimages by emperors and aristocrats over the centuries. And so what I'd like to do is just shift your attention to the view just down here below, and you might be able to see the different levels of concentrated areas with cherry blossoms down the mountain view below here. And this is because there are actually 4 levels up this mountain. You have Shimo, Naka, Kami, and Oku, literally in Japanese meaning bottom, middle, top, and further on. And so the concentration of these trees is called senbon, literally meaning 1,000. So the areas are called Shimo Senbon, for example, the bottom area with 1,000 trees. And so whilst the name here is essentially a metaphor, there are actually 30,000 cherry blossom trees on this mountain. And they may all look quite similar, but there are around 200 different types of cherry blossoms here. But the most common type is called the Yamazakura, which literally means mountain sakura, and it's characterized by its red leaves that appear prior to blooming, and this is the most prominent variety of sakura growing in the wild here in Japan. And so due to the steep incline of this mountain, the blossoms bloom in order from bottom through to the top as we progress through the blossom season, and as it becomes steadily warmer up the mountain. And so I am currently here in Kami Senbon, where right at the top you might not see quite a lot of blossoms just yet. But this location is perfect for an alternative view of the blossoms from above, in contrast perhaps to the typical sitting underneath view most people are accustomed to. A bonus, of course, is that the cherry blossom season here isn't quite as fleeting as a result. Well, I hope you enjoyed a sneak peek of what I believe is quite a unique place for cherry blossom viewing in Japan. And so I shall leave you now to enjoy this view with this very typical sugary drink called a ramune in the seasonal sakura color. Kanpai.
Hi, my name's Mark and I'm here at Jinkoji Temple in Kamakura City. So a temple is not usually a place that you would associate with Hanami parties, in particular, of course, but I just love the contrast between these two magnificent symbols of Japanese culture, the cherry blossom tree and the Buddhist temple behind it. These particular trees are the Soumei Yoshino variety, which make up 80% of the cherry trees in Japan. But there are over 600 varieties of cherry tree in Japan. Of course, they share many characteristics, but they also vary in different ways. For example, you have different colors, different times of bloom, and other distinctions such as that. One example I think is quite good is we're used to seeing a pink or a white blooming cherry blossom tree, but the variety called ukon is actually a yellow hue. This is because ukon is the Japanese word for turmeric in Japanese, and turmeric is used here as a hangover cure, which makes it particularly good for cherry blossom season because you're sure to have had one too many sakes. Early bloomers include the kawatsu, the yamazakura, which is literally the mountain sakura tree, and also the Edo Higan. But my particular favorite, I would have to say, is the taihaku. Why I like the taihaku most, it's not only its appearance, it grows with a great white broad bunch of petals, but also the history itself. So taihaku literally means great white, and its history is quite interesting because an Englishman named Collingwood Ingram who was a cherry blossom expert recognized worldwide, came over to Japan in 1926 to speak specifically at the Cherry Society of Japan. During his visit, he was shown a photo, or a picture rather, of this particular tree, the Taihaku, and it was believed to have been extinct in Japan. But Collingwood Ingram had noticed that it had actually been previously introduced into the United Kingdom. And so he went back to Kent and he found this particular tree and reintroduced it to Japan over the next few years. Now the Taihaku is not exactly a populous tree, but in Kofu, which is north of Mount Fuji, it is fairly populous, and they even have a festival to celebrate the tree there. So this is one thing that I really like about cherry blossom season. I feel like there's kind of a connection between human beings through nature. And actually, if you do sit down and have a few drinks and some snacks under a cherry blossom tree, you're sure to find that some of the locals will come over and they'll want to ask you where you're from and whether you're enjoying your time in Japan.
Hi everyone, I'm Chantel and I'm joining you from Kinuta Park. And this is an area that is popular for Hanami among locals who live on the western side of Tokyo. So a huge thanks to Van and Brett for showing us some of the cool drinks and snacks that you can enjoy while you do Hanami. However, if you're looking for something a little bit more substantial in the food department, there is no better choice, in Japan anyway, than that of onigiri, which is rice balls. So onigiri is the portable food of choice, as well as a comfort food. So if you ask people about it, most people can share fond memories of making their favorite onigiri flavors with their parents and then coming out and having a picnic during cherry blossom season. So some popular flavors include things like pickled plum, salted salmon, kombu, which is the type of seaweed known for being packed with umami, and the ever so modern tuna mayonnaise. So, like I said, you can always make your own onigiri like I've done today, and I chose to make pickled plum, you can see the pink, and kombu combination, and then wrap it in a Japanese perla leaf. But if you're feeling a little lazy and you don't want to make your own, you could always stop by one of Japan's all-encompassing convenience stores and pick up this perfectly made pre-wrapped onigiri. And you'll notice that this one is double wrapped in plastic, so the outer layer of seaweed will always stay crispy. So, whether you're willing to sacrifice and have yours a little soggy like mine is here, or if you want it crispy, you can have the best of both worlds in Japan. So, you have your onigiri, you're sitting under the cherry blossom trees, snacking on your kakipi, sipping on some sake. That's all fine and dandy, but it's important to remember that the real reason for the season is celebrating the grand debut of spring. So Brett mentioned that people in Japan love to celebrate the seasons, which is 100% true. However, they're celebrating much more than just the traditional 4 seasons. So over 1,500 years ago, a 24-season calendar made its way from China into Japan. But as you can imagine, the climate of China and Japan don't exactly line up perfectly. So in order to make it their own, Japan took these 24 seasons and further divided each season into 3 subcategories, giving you a total of 72 different micro-seasons. That is a lot to keep up with, but it does give you a new season to celebrate about every 5 days. So these seasons aren't just named, Spring 1, Spring 2, Spring 3. Japan does much better than that. All the seasons are named with visual cues that really give you a poetic journey throughout the year, as well as describe what the world looked like around you. So some examples include things like frogs start singing, bamboo shoots sprout, or one of my personal favorites, evening cicadas sing. So we just passed the very aptly named season, cherry blossoms bloom, and that was just about a week ago. And they did indeed start blooming last week. And then yesterday we came into a new season called Distant Thunder Roars. And to give you an example of how accurate these seasons are, just last night it did indeed rain, which is why you can see there's some scattered cherry blossom leaves down, or cherry blossom petals down here. So even after hundreds of years, these 72 seasons remain intact. So you'll see all kinds of ways to celebrate the seasons through things like Hanami. You'll see them pop up as motifs in paintings, and sometimes you'll see seasonal mentions in literature. So we'll hear more about that with Richard. Thanks for listening, and I'm ready to eat these now.
Hi, I'm Richard Farmer, and I'm here in my current home of Osaka, in the grounds of Osaka Castle. And Osaka has a bit of a reputation for being a bit of an ugly concrete jungle. And there is a degree of truth in that, although there's a lot of charms that come with it. But I'm happy to say that there are also some lovely wide open green spaces in Osaka as well. And the grounds of Osaka Castle are one of those, and one of the most popular spots for people who live in Osaka to come and do cherry blossom viewing. And today I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between cherry blossom and Japanese poetry and literature, one of the best windows that we have to the past in Japan. And perhaps appropriately for a samurai period castle, I want to introduce first a writing by a Buddhist monk called Yoshida Kenko, and he wrote a book called Surezure Gusa, or Essays in Idleness in English, where he basically compiled his musings about the world, including a very telling quote about cherry blossoms. He said, "Are we to look at cherry blossoms only in full bloom, the moon only when it is cloudless, to long for the moon while looking on the rain, to lower the blinds and be unaware of the passing of the spring? These are even more deeply moving. Branches about to blossom, or gardens strewn with faded flowers, are worthier of our admiration." And what he's really emphasizing here is this Japanese concept of mono no aware, which is kind of the beauty that can be found in the transience of things. But people were writing about cherry blossoms in Japan well before Yoshida Kenko in the Kamakura period. As early as the Heian period in Japan, over 1,000 years ago, people were writing poetry and stories about cherry blossoms. And perhaps one of the most famous pieces of Heian period literature is the Issei Monogatari, Tales of Issei, a collection of poems and short prose following the exploits of a kind of Heian period courtier who was also a bit of a playboy. He had lots of different wives and girlfriends that he was kind of stringing along. And one of the poems spoken by him in that work goes like this: "If only there were no cherry trees in this world, our hearts in springtime would then perhaps not be so aflutter." And it's about cherry blossoms, but it's also a kind of metaphor. The cherry blossoms that he's referring to are actually all of the women in his life that cause him all kinds of troubles. And one of my favorite pieces of Heian period literature is this work here. This is the Pillow Book by a Heian period courtier lady called Sei Shonagon. And like Yoshida Kenko, she basically collated all of her thoughts and musings and lots of gossip about life serving in the emperor's court. And she had this to say about cherry blossoms: "If you break off a branch of splendidly flowering cherry and arrange it in a large flower vase, the effect is delightful. And it's particularly charming if a gentleman, be it one of Her Majesty's brothers or a normal guest, is seated nearby engaged in conversation, wearing a cloak in the cherry blossom combination with undersleeves displayed." This is a great book, and if you want to get some Heian period gossip, it's a really great read. But perhaps this work is overshadowed by the most famous work of Heian period literature, this rather hefty tome, The Tale of Genji, by Murasaki Shikibu. And it runs to about 1,500 pages. It takes a while to get through, but it's so richly rewarding and offers a great window into Heian period court life. One of the chapters of this book, chapter 8, Hana no En, focuses entirely on a cherry blossom viewing party arranged by the emperor. But there's some other great quotes within the Tale of Genji about cherry blossoms. Perhaps one of the most famous is this one: "There is much to be said for cherry blossoms, but they seem so flighty. They are so quick to run off and leave you. And just when your regrets are the strongest, the wisteria comes into bloom, and it blooms on into the summer." Another quote emphasizing the ephemerality of cherry blossoms. But I want to leave you today not with a work so hefty as the Tale of Genji, but with a much shorter type of prose, or should I say poem, a haiku, a Japanese poem using 5, 7, and 5 syllables, which I've composed specially for the occasion. "Maybe not this spring, but cherry will bloom again. Japan is waiting. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I want to finish by raising a toast, and I'm off to go and view some cherry blossoms. Kanpai!